Up next on Veteran on the Move, I'm talking with Navy veteran Andrew Watts from Point Whiskey Publishing.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranonthemove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. Andrew Watts graduated from the US Naval Academy in 2003 and served as a naval officer and helicopter pilot until 2013. During that time, he flew counter-narcotic missions in the Eastern Pacific and counter-piracy missions off the Horn of Africa. He was a flight instructor in Pensacola, Florida, and helped to run ship and flight operations while embarked on a nuclear aircraft carrier deployed in the Middle East. All right, Andrew Watts, welcome to Veteran on the Move. Thanks for being here. We're looking forward to hearing your entrepreneurial journey. So before we get to talking about that, take us back and tell us what you did in the Navy. Sure.
Well, Joe, once again, thank you for having me. But to start off, I got out of the Navy in 2013. I was in for about 10 years. So I was a Navy helicopter pilot. I flew the SH-60 Bravo, the Seahawk helicopter, and I was in the community that flew off the smaller warships, so like the destroyers and frigates and whatnot. But I flew counter-narcotics missions in the Eastern Pacific, counter-piracy missions off of Africa, and went to several other places as well. I was also a helicopter flight instructor down in Pensacola, and then was an air operations officer on an aircraft carrier for a couple of years on the USS Enterprise.
All right. You flying some starboard DE off the Enterprise?
I was pretty much in a desk job. So I was deep in the hull of the ship, and my friends and I roomed with a submariner, and he and I used to joke that it was just like being on a submarine because we never saw daylight. You know,
you're on an aircraft carrier surrounded by the most aircraft on board any ship, exactly. And you're a pilot, and you're not flying. I
did become good friends with the one helicopter squadron. HS-10 was on board, and I became friends with them, and they let me fly a couple times with them. But for the most part, I was deep in the weeds with PowerPoint and Excel. Getting my captain ready for the admiral's brief later in the day. Now,
was that your last tour when you got out, or were you a flight instructor when you were getting out?
So I was a flight instructor first, and then I went to the aircraft carrier. That was my last tour before I got out. So our second child, my first daughter, was 2 weeks old when I left, and I was gone for 8 months, and probably 10 months out of that year I was gone.
Wow, that's tough. So were you plotting your escape while you were stuck in the deep bowels of the USS Enterprise?
Sort of, yes. So I decided to get out. My wife and I, it was kind of a dual decision, but I decided to get out before I went on that final deployment when I was already with that command. So yeah, it was 2012 was when we deployed, and 2013 was when I got out of the Navy officially. So I came back I think Halloween in 2012, and we were home for maybe a month, and then we went out to sea again for a month to train the USS Truman Carrier Strike Group, and then I came home, and I was out of the Navy like within a few weeks. So I was trying to job search while I was on the USS Enterprise on deployment. That was pretty tough when you have limited connectivity and limited access to a computer. But I think, after I was finally able to get out and be on land and have good connectivity, I was able to do the job search. The job search thing lasted about 2 to 3 months, I would say. It was probably 2 months of interviewing with different companies and applying to different jobs and learning and doing kind of networking with people that we knew, so I could learn about different job career paths. And I found Proctor Gamble through the Service Academy Career Conference, SAC, and went into marketing with them.
So talk about your you obviously weren't looking towards this entrepreneur thing in the beginning, were you? Or were you just, you just had to get a job because you had 2 kids at this point, and you just needed something you could pay the bills and transition out with?
Yeah. So when I was a flight instructor, so that was kind of my middle job. If you break up my Navy career into 3 jobs, first I was a JO with a helicopter squadron. My middle job was, my middle tour was at HT-8 in Pensacola as a flight instructor. And then the final job was on the aircraft carrier. But while I was a flight instructor in that middle job, I was in Pensacola, Florida, and I decided that I wanted to get my MBA because I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in or get out. And I think a master's degree looks good, whether you're continuing on the officer track in the military or whether you decide to get out. So I wanted to find a master's degree that would help me in both of those cases because I wanted to keep my options open. So I went to the University of Florida. I did the distance MBA program with them. I think they call it the Internet MBA, because back then the Internet was like a new cool buzzword. So it was a great program. And one of the classes I took was entrepreneurship. And several of the classes I took were in marketing. I really enjoyed the different business-related classes that were in the program. And I think that's what kind of led me to look at a brand management career path or marketing career path. And the funny thing while we're talking about this, when I was doing that job search and I interviewed with dozens of different companies, I tried to look at maybe some of the smaller companies or the lesser known companies, look at marketing jobs in those companies. And a lot of them wouldn't even give me the time of day. They all wanted to kind of pigeonhole me into where they normally stick junior military officers, either a manufacturing job or perhaps a sales job. But it's really some of these bigger companies like the Proctor Gambles of the world that look past the fact that you might not have that on your resume and might not have a background in a certain function, and they're willing to take the chance and to spend the time to train you because they can kind of recognize that a lot of military officers just getting out have a ton of potential and are hardworking and disciplined, and they reap the rewards for that investment. I think in those people.
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of companies, HR departments, they get hung up on what we refer to as hard skills, the degrees, the MBAs, the certifications, that kind of stuff that they can quantify on a resume or something. But the smarter companies, the companies that have figured it out, and it's tough to sift through a military guy's resume and glean out some of those soft skills. But typically, if you have people in your military hiring department, they can look at somebody's experience and judge, like, okay, this person's probably going to have some really good soft skills, how they've operated and the experiences they've had in the military. And really, in the end, it's the soft skills that rise you to the top. It's not necessarily your hard skills. Sometimes your hard skills get you the job, but it's your soft skills that ultimately result in your performance.
Right.
And I think some of those companies have realized that, and it's not quite as easy to determine the soft skills, but they're figuring out that they need to pay more attention to those soft skills, and the military members themselves need to pay more attention to their soft skills. And oftentimes we don't realize the level of soft skills that we actually have because it's not easily put down on a resume.
Right, and even I think a lot of the military folks I know that maybe they don't have some of those hard skills when they get out. The amount of effort and dedication that they put into developing those skills right away. They might be caught up in a much shorter time period than your average Joe that, might be coming out of college or maybe has a couple years in finance or marketing or whatnot. So I saw some very successful former military folks while I was at Procter & Gamble. I mean, P&G loves ex-military, but there's a lot of companies like that. I've got a buddy working at McKinsey, one at Boston Consulting Group. I know some at, some of the big Wall Street firms and some of the tech companies out in Silicon Valley. And they're all doing quite well. And they did not have a background in the function that they're operating in right now. But those companies, I think they like to recruit veterans, and I think it's kind of patriotic and everything. But it's really not it's not that they're being selfless. It helps the companies out a lot, I think, when they do invest in those people, because those people can earn their keep quite quickly if you give them the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long were you at Procter and Gamble, and what was going on, with the entrepreneurial itch?
Yep. So I spent 4 years at P&G, and I went into brand management right away in a section of the company called New Business Creation. So if there is a place for someone that wants to be an entrepreneur, it's that section of the company. I was the only marketer. Eventually there was one other, but I was the only marketer at my level. So my kind of rank, which was equivalent to like an O2, I would say. In that organization, it was about 75 people. P&G as a company has about 100,000 or more people. So it was a very small section, and it was very top heavy. A lot of kind of executives in that section that are experts in research and development, some in finance, some in marketing, some in sales. But so I was in a lot on consumer research. So what our job was to create new businesses and new brands that the company would invest in long term. So like Febreze, Swiffer, both of those brands came out of that section of the company. So they basically would work on all these different products and projects to hopefully create the next big thing in consumer products. So I got to do consumer research all over the country and sometimes all over the world. They sent me to China and Japan to go into people's homes and ask them about different things as we were developing different products. And a lot of the work I did was kind of developing TV commercials or marketing and advertising, as well as like what the brand identity was and the brand story was for these potential products that we would then want to launch. But it was a very long-term assignment, and typically people would work on, you might work on a dozen or 24 projects, and 99% of them are going to get canceled. So it's kind of like the venture capital world. They want to see a lot of things, and they put a little bit of time and energy and money into it. But knowing that it's kind of like a high risk, high reward thing where a lot of it just doesn't pan out. So that experience, I think, and also my love of reading fiction, I think kind of meshed. And I decided that I wanted to check out self-publishing and go into writing on my own. I'd read a lot about how people were publishing their own books on Amazon through Kindle Direct Publishing and some other retailers as well, and finding a lot of success in it. I don't know if you've heard of Hugh Howey, but he had a science fiction book called Wool that came out, and I think they're going to make a movie out of it. But he's probably making at least 6 figures a month, maybe 7 figures a month right now. And it started off with a little 99-cent book that he put on, a few chapters at a time, and it just took off. And things like that were really interesting to me because, again, I love stories, and I've always loved like Tom Clancy and Vince Flynn and books like that. So I wanted to give it a shot.
Hey, so go back to Procter & Gamble. I'm curious, did Procter & Gamble invent Febreze and the Swiffer, or did they find a product? Okay, I was just wondering. And was that the way most of it was? They were coming up with the need and inventing the product and experimenting with products themselves. They typically didn't go out and buy products that already existed.
I don't think I'm giving away any company secrets here, because I know I've signed non-disclosure agreements. But
yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah. But they do it all sorts of different ways. So sometimes they will have companies approach them. Sometimes they'll approach companies. And they'll work with them to develop a product, or they might acquire a company. I think P&G less so than some of these tech companies. Some of these tech companies that they see the new Instagram or whatever, and they'll snap it up. $500 million. They won't think twice about it. Procter & Gamble, I think, is much more risk averse, and they're more likely to develop something on their own. So they've got a large and a very top level R&D section of the company, and we worked with a lot of those scientists to develop our own things and to test different types of products and chemical formulations or whatnot that might get a desired result. So I can't really go into the different things that I worked on, but there were some really neat ideas out there for different consumer products that you could use in your house, or and some of them are kind of wild. But it was fun for me because I got to work with these advertising agencies in New York and LA and different places to kind of bring it to life, and create these campaigns that we would then go bring in front of test markets or consumer groups and see how well they worked. So that's actually it was a lot of great learning for me because it's something that I've been able to take and then transition to what I'm doing now. So a lot of what I do now when I write books, I probably spend about half my day writing, and then the other half is in marketing. So, creating Facebook ads or doing email marketing or whatnot, and a lot of the messaging, the writing copy, the kind of getting the visuals to look just right. A lot of that work is important in any business. And I think the training that I got at Proctor Gamble and, just what we were doing there and the repetition that I got, I think that helped out a ton.
All right, Andrew, hold on there. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Have you joined the Veteran on the Move Facebook group? I personally invite every guest that I have on the podcast to join the group. So the Veteran on the Move Facebook group is a great way to connect with previous podcast guests. Our Facebook group will keep you in touch with other veterans that are transitioning to entrepreneurship, and you will also get great updates and free guides on the people, programs, and resources that will help you in your transition to entrepreneurship. All right, we're back talking with Andrew Watts from Point Whiskey Publishing. And Andrew, before we get a little bit farther into your publishing business, I wanted to ask you one more question about Procter & Gamble. You said 99 out of 100 ideas were typically scrapped. And I'm real curious about that because my wife and I have an Amazon business. I know a lot of Amazonians, and we're always looking for products and throwing stuff out there and seeing what works. It's interesting that a company that, the size and scope that Procter & Gamble is, they toss aside 99 out of 100 ideas, and I can certainly understand why. But I'm curious, is it from your opinion, your perspective, do you think it's because 99 of those ideas would not have worked, or their Procter & Gamble is just extremely selective, so they only pick 1 out of 100? Or you think it was a numbers game? They had to throw a bunch of bad ideas up there just to make it look like they were doing stuff?
No, I think there's a lot of good ideas, but I think a lot of it is, one of the things that a company like Procter & Gamble, which makes $85 billion a year in revenue, one of the things that they're looking for when they're going to invest a lot of money and create a new brand is size of market. So our minimum market size, again, I don't know how much I'm really supposed to be able to say here, but I think we were looking for minimum like $50 million, and very quickly if we're gonna put something behind it. And there's a lot of good ideas, but we used to joke around as soon as somebody said like, "Hey, that would be great for camping," that was like the death sentence for a project. Because it meant that it was probably a niche product, that didn't have like a mass market appeal. And for a big company, if you really want to do well, it's got to be, it has to be cheap to make. You have to have good margins, and it has to be scalable. There has to be a lot of potential interest in it. So to kind of answer your question, also, I don't necessarily think that it's 99 ideas out of 100 won't work. Part of it is the experience and the opinions of the executives, and that's one of the things that kind of pushed me into entrepreneurship. Is I wanted to be the one that was making the decision because I felt like a lot of it was arbitrary opinions when some of these people make these decisions.
Yeah, interesting.
But one of the things I learned, because I would do a lot of volume assessments. I would work with the consumer research people to see, okay, how much money are we going to be able to make on this? We had all these different formulas and all this data that would determine, okay, here's our size of prize. And one of the things I found, I thought it mattered a ton. One of the biggest drivers was going to be how much do people like it. So I show them a TV commercial that I just made, or a concept or something, the visual that we made, and tell them about the product. And then what really matters is how much they like it and how much they'll pay for it. But what really mattered, the biggest driver of all, was distribution. how many people can you get it in front of? How many stores? How many facings on the shelf? How much shelf space are you going to get? Distribution was the biggest driver of your sales by far. So I think that's what's changed in the past 10 to 15 years, as all this maker community is able to have create their own businesses and do really well. Is just any average person can get a book or any other widget in front of everyone through Facebook advertising, through different online advertising, and retailers like Amazon or eBay or whatever that are going to allow you to get your product in front of the masses. Once you get a net positive return on investment from advertising, you can start scaling that ad spend, and then it could go from 0 to 100 very quickly.
Yeah, interesting. 'Cause like from an Amazon seller perspective, oftentimes we're not looking at 50 million in market share or whatever. You're more concerned with, well, could I get to the point of selling 10 or 20 a day?
Right.
Which is so minuscule compared to what larger companies are looking at. But really, it's the same decision making process. It's like you've got to find that range of, there's got to be enough demand with fairly low competition in order to break into that niche. And so if you're not paying attention to that, if you're just going off of, but this is a really good idea, you can spend a lot of time and money going down the wrong direction. So it was interesting perspective. So you're at Procter and Gamble, and you've always been interested in books, and you start getting interested in looking into self-publishing.
Yep. So I guess one thing I didn't mention, while I was on the aircraft carrier, in the middle of deployment, I started writing. After a while, there was a lull in our level of activity on the day-to-day, schedule. We're in the middle of the Arabian Sea. Jets are launching into Afghanistan every day. And I would have like a 2-hour break in the middle of the day every day. And so, work out a lot of times, but sometimes I'd write. So I ended up writing about 50 pages of a story while I was out in deployment. And then when I came home, I just kind of shelved it and didn't think about it for probably more than a year at least. We had a friend that was visiting us in the Cincinnati area, and she was writing a nonfiction book. And I happened to mention to her, I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote about 50 pages of a book one time, but I don't know how good it is or anything. And she's like, you wrote 50 pages, you should absolutely publish that, or finish it anyway, finish the book. And so I was like, you're right, I should. And so I started researching. That's when I got really serious, and I was about 1.5 to 2 years into my marketing job at that point. And that's when I started researching self-publishing for real. I started listening to a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of books, and just learning how it all works and how these people that were successful became successful in that field. And that's, I think I put down, I uploaded a novella, maybe 30 or 40,000 words. So, less than 100 pages. And it was 99 cents. And I did that. And then I started doing episodes, and I put another one out a few months later that was like a sequel to it, like a TV show. And I put another one out a few months later, and I realized people that read Tom Clancy books really don't like that. And so they like the story, but they don't like having to wait, and get little drip bits at a time. So I've learned a ton over the past couple of years, but that is how it started. Is I just, I started doing it when I was on deployment out of, kind of as a hobby. And then one of my friends, one of our family friends, encouraged me to do it. She was writing her own book. And I think part of it was working in that new business creation area at P&G. We were creating businesses all the time, and it's all we worked on. And I feel like being a former military officer, and I used to fly around $35 million aircraft and be the aircraft commander, and I would make all the decisions. We'd be 100 miles away from anyone else, over water. No one was near us, and see a piracy attack or respond to a piracy attack, and I'm the one that's in charge of making all the decisions. And I think I wanted that control again. I wanted to be in charge, and I wanted to be able to say yes or no, that's a good idea for a business or a bad idea for a business. In my case, it's probably for a plot idea or a book title or a cover or something. I wanted to be the decision maker, and I wanted to sink or swim off, my own work and my own opinions.
Right.
And I think that drives.
We're all
a
control
lot of
freaks in
right.
one form or another, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what kind of numbers can you share with us? What was your first book? How many books have you written? What kind of sales you got?
I've written. I don't do them in episodes anymore because I kind of learned that lesson. So
yeah. I was going to say we're all too used to binging on Netflix episodes and everything.
Right. Yeah. So I've written 3 books. I've recently published my 3rd book, and I also have a box set of all 3 together. So that's kind of like a higher priced, product, but it's more SKUs that are out there. So they're published in all formats. So paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And I give away the first one for free on my website when you sign up for the email list. And that is really one of the huge drivers of sales, especially when you launch a book, is how big is your email list. So I have about 15 to 20,000 followers now, probably about 15 to 16,000 on my email list, and then several thousand on social networks that follow me. My revenue this month for the first time is over $10,000, so it's now in the 5 figures. That being said, this was a launch month for me, so that's kind of an outlier. And I also spent probably $6,000 to create the book, between editing costs, audiobook production. I've got an actor in New York that does the audiobook, cover design. There's someone in the UK that creates a lot of covers for a lot of these indie authors that are doing well. And I that's several $100s. Also, I've got operating costs. Just advertising is a big one. So I spend several $1,000s a month in advertising. And depending on where things are at, right this month, I probably spent about $2,000 in advertising, and just having an email list, operating a website, your basic, that's a few $100s, to do stuff like that.
Yeah. And I did want to say, you've walked away from corporate America. You're actually full time on this now, right?
That's right. Yep. So I was joking around, my friends at P&G had a little party for me on my last day. And I was joking around with them that if things don't go so well, they can expect to hear from me in about a year, and I'll be talking about how much I miss doing Excel-based work. And I told them if things do go well, they should know how much they all meant to me, and feel free to leave a voicemail with my agent anytime.
And how long have you been all in?
Since March 1st is when that was my last day at P&G. So it took me about a year to write a book prior to that. And I left March 1st, and I probably had about the first third of the book written, and I finished it, published it, and did the box and everything else, and it was launched May 8th. So
we're recording this on the last day of May. So yep. you've been 90 days on your own. That's right. Yep. What does it feel like? It's awesome in a lot of ways. I like it. No commute, no meetings. I feel like I was constantly just on my Outlook calendar and seeing, okay, what's next, just in back-to-back meetings all day. And you're trying to fit in your actual work in between the meetings, or, if you can't, you have to do work in the meetings and multitask. And in the military, that didn't work, but in corporate America, I feel like you have to, otherwise you can't keep up. This is way more laid back, and I make my own schedule, but I think that requires a lot of discipline. And I don't know that I would have been able to do this. I know I wouldn't have been able to do this a few years ago when I got out of the military, because I just wouldn't have had the knowledge and experience to be able to do it. So I think that is one of the things that I would recommend if anyone is considering either, creating their own business, or if they wanted to go into self-publishing. I would recommend, taking a corporate job and having it be a side project as you learn and gain experience and build up your book of sales, and
get to the point where you can jump off and know that you're going to have you've already established a decent track record, and then you're going to have a certain level of success, almost guaranteed.
All right, Andrew. So, what are the names of a couple of your books, and how do we find them?
So the best way to find out about my books is to go to my website, and that's Andrew Watts Author, 2 W's in the middle, andrewwattsauthor.com. And you'll find all the books there. The War Planners was the first one. It's kind of like a Tom Clancy, Vince Flynn thriller. There's 3 of them now. Pawns of the Pacific was the most recent launch, and then there's the box set. They're on all major retailers. If you go on Amazon or Apple or Nook, you can find them there. So,
all right, great. And so, the important thing is, are you making enough money at the moment to pay the bills? You think you're 90 days into it? You get enough runway, or?
So far, so good. And then, I'm about 2/3 done with the next book, and I'm planning on launching that one in September. So it's kind of a volume game with when you're self-publishing and you're not like a big name like John Grisham or something, and you're not on the shelves in Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to put out more books per year, 3 to 4 books per year. But I keep building that email list. The launches get better every time. The sales get better every time I launch. So I think things will work out, and I'm pretty happy with what I've seen so far.
All right, great. Well, so unfortunately, Andrew, we're about the end of our time. If you happen to be talking to that guy that's still in, maybe it's a military spouse who's overseas somewhere with, living overseas, somebody that's going through a transition, anybody from the military community that's looking to get into entrepreneurship in one form or another, does any particular advice come to mind?
I think, again, I'd probably go back to what I said before. I think it behooves you to gain experience, gain some of those hard skills in corporate America. So for me, anyway, I'm a little bit conservative. Gain something, skill that you have to fall back on if you need it. So, for me, I think marketing and supply chain management at Proctor Gamble, I worked in both of those functions there. And then learn on the side. So I'm always reading or listening to podcasts to learn about both the self-publishing world and the digital advertising world, so that I can get smarter and improve my business while I'm doing it.
All right, Andrew. Well, hey, it was great hearing your entrepreneurial success story. We look forward to seeing your books out there. Someday I'm going to be walking through an airport somewhere, and there's going to be one of your books out there front and center. I'll be like, hey, I know that guy.
Hope so.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing, and we look forward to your future success.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. These 2 veterans are Oscar Mike. As you can tell from listening to the Veteran on the Move podcast, interviews are a great way to tell your story and spread the word about your business. If you would like to get booked as a podcast guest, I recommend Interview Valet. You can check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. Be sure to check out Thrive15.com, the world's premier online education platform that helps entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs learn how to start or grow a successful business. Start your free 30-day membership by going to Thrive15.com and use the promo code VETERAN. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.